Welcome back to Beyond the Steps. I am the co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear, Bree Zabrowski, here with my fabulous friend and co-host, Melissa McDaniel Grisham, and we are excited to be back with a brand new conversation for you. We're talking about if you've had somebody in the marching arts that you know has been in the marching arts, you may applaud them from afar, but may not fully understand the depth of these organizations and what they're doing for these incredible and talented marching artists. We're talking about what is DCI today and how is it promoting health and wellness within the marching arts. And they're doing that in a lot of ways. And we're excited to share that with you and educate you today. We're learning as well. So we're really excited to have Laura Van Doren and Genevieve Kessler here with us to educate us on this topic. For those of you not familiar with Beyond the Steps, this is a show we dive into all things affecting performing artists, from gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, racism, nutrition, psychology, and of course, medicine and science. We do this every single Friday. We ask one question and we go into big detail with our guests about resources and education and information and perspective, because when you know better, you do better. So today, again, we're talking about what is DCI and how is it promoting health and wellness within the marching arts community. Melissa, without further ado, why don't you tell everybody who we've got with us today?
We are so very excited to have two new guests with us this week. We have Genevieve Geisler. She's the Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and Co-Corps Director for the Blue Coats Drum and Bugle Corps, where she has been a driving force in the growth of the Blue Coats organization over the past 20 years. She's a founding member and current chair of the Drum Corps International's InStep DEI committee. Geisler holds a Bachelor of Science and Master of Public Health degrees from the University of Michigan and lives in Canton, Ohio with 2 children and a cat. Laura Van Doren is a nurse practitioner with over 40 years of experience in the areas of emergency medicine and women's health. She began her involvement in Drum Corps International in 1972 as a performer, and years later became a parent, volunteer providing health care for Carolina Crown for almost a decade. In 2010, she was asked by Dan Atchison, the former DCI executive director, to chair what is now known as the DCI Marching Arts Safety and Health Initiative, also known as MASH, which is an organization of allied health professionals who volunteer their time and expertise to promote health, wellness, safety, and prevent injury and illness within the Drum Corps activity. When not busy running MASH, Laura enjoys spending time with her children and grandchildren. Drum Corps is a family activity for the Van Dorens, as her husband and children remain very, very involved. Welcome both of you to Beyond the Steps.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Laura, I don't think people fully understand how strenuous marching arts is on the body and what these artistic athletes are going through each season with their bodies. Talk a little bit about the biggest misconceptions that you have seen when it comes to health and wellness for marching arts collectively.
Well, I don't think anyone can deny that it is become increasingly athletic over the last few decades. And what the participants are doing now on the field, whether it's Drum Corps National or marching bands, is not what they were doing, certainly when I was in high school, and even when my kids were in high school and Drum Corps. The endurance and the moves that they're doing now just require incredible preparation and training. And I think, as it was evolving, we were seeing more and more injuries, and that just really opened our eyes to the need for refocus on safety, health and safety and wellness, to make sure that the activity was moving in the right direction. Because Drum Corps International, above all else, it's an organization that provides this ability for these students to participate at this level, and they are very committed to health and safety.
Yeah, thank you. I can say firsthand, and we were talking a little bit about this ahead of the call, is when we didn't know what we were walking into the first time we did a Bands of America event as Apollo, and going in there and seeing just hearing the rigorous training these athletes are putting in, the uneven surfaces they're constantly rehearsing, the long hours they're rehearsing, it's pretty intense. And the injuries they're dealing with are very similar. Laura, we were talking about our background is in dance, and very, very similar in terms of what they're experiencing with the injury rates, and really the lack of support available to them right now, to accommodate all the movement they're doing. So we're really excited to have this conversation. Genevieve, I want to start with you. So we have DCI, we have MASH, we have InStep. So I think it's really important, for people to understand the differences, what these three things mean. We like to lay a foundation at this show. So educate the people out there. What are these three things? And obviously, collectively, their mission is to prioritize health and wellness within the marching arts. But how do they work separately, and how do they work in tandem?
So DCI is Drum Corps International, and you can think of it sort of like the NBA or NFL. It's an overarching organization of the member groups. So in each individual drum corps, you can think of like a team. So, the Boston Celtics, the LA Lakers, whatever. So each one of those teams has a voice and a vote in DCI, Drum Corps International, into what we do and how we participate. At the same time, DCI is its own nonprofit organization with a board of directors that's elected by the member corps representatives. So that's, that sets the framework for our competitive field, and it also has the authority and responsibility for setting rules and regulations and standards for the way that we comport ourselves, professionally, and in many ways, a whole slew of different things that affect the health and wellness and safety of all of our participants, whether, participants, of course, focusing on student participants, but really everyone that's involved, from the students to the staff, especially as we travel down the road as a group. So what MASH and InStep are committees formed by committees and sub-organizations formed by DCI, by the DCI board and membership, in order to focus on specific, concerns and topics. There are other committees like, competition or whatever, those type of things that have different concerns. But InStep was formed as a DEI committee, and MASH was formed to, look at issues of member safety, health, and wellness within the organization, and then form recommendations, a group of professionals, all of those types of things. They each have their own kind of mission statement within there, but we all serve the greater organization. So that's kind of how that works.
So both committees are, DCI kind of oversees both of those committees, and those committees help set the regulation for DCI. Would that be fair to say?
I'd say regulations, recommendations, professional expertise, a network, a network advisory, all of those things. Yes. Okay. Ultimately, it's DCI who decides what the regulation, the board of directors or the member groups, depending on the topic, what the regulations are, but the information and the talking and the expertise comes from within the various committees.
Got it. Thank you. That is very helpful, actually. I really appreciate that, because it is very confusing to hear all these different names and what do they mean? And I wonder, are these pretty well known in the marching arts community as far as the members? Do they understand, or is this going to be helpful for them to hear too?
I think it's helpful for everyone. And, it is a bit complicated because each of the member groups, like Blue Coats, sure, Carolina Crown, Blue Devils, they're each their own independent organization with their own nonprofit status, their own committees, their own experts and standards for themselves. But we also have to answer to this larger group that, not only sets regulations, though, can provide advice and expertise to everyone. So I think it does, get a little confusing for people that don't spend all of their time working on it.
I love that we're having the conversation. So what are the primary objectives of Drum Corps International, or DCI, regarding safety and health of its participants? Obviously, it's a huge priority, knowing that they have two committees dedicated to that. But what is that goal for DCI?
Well, I can let Lori speak to how she feels about it in regard to the MASH committee, but I think just generally, over time, each one of the organizations, as well as Drum Corps International itself, has grown from something smaller and less complicated into something bigger and more complicated and potentially more dangerous. And, of course, along with how society has moved forward in the past 20, 30, et cetera years. And so while a lot of things have in the past been left to each individual organization. I think it became clear over time that, you know, there needed to be at least a floor or a platform of standards, regulations, um, you know, for health and wellness and DEI type participant safety topics that came down from the overall organization, that each group can't do just exactly what they want, or not that anyone was doing anything wrong per se or on purpose, but that there's a lot of advice, a lot of information from experts that's available to be shared, that each group doesn't have to reinvent on their own. So I think it comes from that. And everyone's desire to, you know, while we all might have our own loyalties or organizations that we work for, you know, that when it comes down to the safety of students and young people, there's nothing that, you know, there's nothing that's not worth sharing with everyone else if you have an expertise available.
And when you say DEI, can you tell me what you're referring to with that acronym?
Sure. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, you know, InStep was started several years ago as a committee focusing on issues of, you know, empowering women participants in DCI, but over time it became a all-encompassing DEI committee that focused on issues of diversity, equity, inclusion that's not specifically focused on women anymore, but for all groups.
Love it. That's the catalyst for this show and Beyond the Steps. So we love that. Laura, what was the catalyst to creating MASH and InStep, and how have you seen the industry change because of those things?
So because we are such a unique activity, you know, if you go and ask most people, have they heard of a drum and bugle corps? I mean, perhaps nowadays you might get a yes answer, but, you know, a lot of people don't know what drum corps is. Excuse me. And so as this became increasingly athletic, we realized that we were seeing more and more injuries and more things that need to be addressed from a health and safety perspective. And so back in 2007, a group of healthcare professionals associated with a drum and bugle corps called the Cavaliers, drum and bugle corps from the Chicago area, started the organization, which at the time was known as the Drum Corps Medical Project. And it grew out of, as I said, the Cavaliers Medical Group. And then in 2010, when I was working with the Carolina Crown Drum and Bugle Corps as their medical advisor and parent volunteer, one of our members had a pretty striking injury, a tibial plateau fracture. And you just don't see that kind of thing happening from a stress fracture or you didn't used to see that in the marching arts at all. That was something that you saw more in other, you know, recognized sports. And so that was the catalyst for DCI to take this to the next level, was because they were seeing all these injuries, and because most of the volunteer healthcare professionals within these organizations were more medically trained as opposed to sports medicine trained. And so that became a catalyst for us to realize that we actually needed people trained in sports medicine, such as athletic trainers, because this was an athletic activity and we needed to recognize it as such. And so in 2011, well, I guess was my first year to chair what is now known as MASH. Again, it was called the Drum Corps Medical Project. And since then, we have seen that almost every organization has, besides just having medical professionals, and I'm not saying we don't need nurses and physicians and all of those people, most organizations have on staff or have access to athletic trainers and physical therapists, because that, you know, those are the kind of injuries that, you know, we're seeing that we had to address, that were not being addressed sufficiently. And, you know, the organization was just, you know, taking off in an athletic direction, and we were just running behind it. And now hopefully we're running, if not at the same pace, a bit ahead. And I'll give you one example. And you were talking about the difference between individual corps and the overarching organization called Drum Corps International. I don't think anyone at this point can deny that climate change is happening, and we have seen how it's affected our activity. And so as an organization and under the guidance from our organization, Drum Corps International took on this year as one of its projects how to best address climate change to make sure that we are moving in a safe direction from all aspects, from rehearsal and performance standpoints, from event safety standpoints, or perspective, I should say, to make sure that we are recognizing climate change and managing it appropriately within the organization.
Right. Like it's things like that people don't think about. Like those adjustments have to be made to keep everybody safe. I have a follow-up question to all of this, because as you talk about this, listening to what Genevieve said, listening to what you're saying, Laura, about the development of, okay, we recognize that there was a need, and so we developed this, and now people are bought in, and they are like, yay, we really, want this. Coming from the dance world, and as much as Bree and I talk about, oh, we need some regulation. Oh, we need, is everybody really bought in? Has DCI always been there? And it's just kind of been like the thing, like everybody looks to DCI and they follow these regulations. Are there consequences for not following the regulations? How do you get because I would love to see a DCI-ish of dance. And then there are member organizations, and they're bought in, and they have voting power, and there's committees, and I would love to see that, but I can totally see all the pushback happening if we were to try to establish something like that. Is there pushback? Are there consequences if you don't follow these regulations, and what are they? That might be for Genevieve, maybe, probably.
Well, I would say that as we've developed any standards, like in any organization, I want, I don't know if pushback is exactly the right word, but there's certainly reticence or unawareness on the part of people, especially if, if like anything else, have been doing something the same way for a long time.
Yes.
People aren't necessarily super open to change. I do think that we're fortunate that we work in a space where people are generally progressive, and I don't necessarily mean that in a political sense per se. I just mean that you're working around the arts, you're working around young people, you're pretty familiar with the issues that are being faced in those segments of, in society or surrounding those things. So, I think that in some ways, we're lucky that that's the case, but it would be false to say that there was no, reticence to follow along with some of these ideas or to understand the need for some of these ideas. But and both of these, MASH, InStep, a lot of it was born out of the fact that there was an, sort of the safety steps or participant protection steps were applied unevenly across the member organizations. And the idea is to have them be applied more evenly, even if they're individualized to the groups, have at least, some, and not just as rules, but also just as information sharing, something you may never, not everyone is an expert in everything, especially when you're coming from like perhaps a musical or marching band background. So I hate to put it in punitive terms, but a lot of it's just like, oh, I never heard of that. I didn't know we should have an athletic trainer instead of a nurse, or not instead, but that they would have a specific expertise that's perfect for this. Maybe I didn't know that until Laura and her committee told us that. But once we are aware and understand the benefits of it, you can start to apply those things. So, the same might be said for some of the things with participant safety, like whistleblower protocols, safe sport, that kind of thing. Not always pushback, but just understanding the why and how, or even hearing of it in order to implement it, So are there consequences? I mean, there have been, everyone, first of all, in order to participate, all the groups have to submit a specific set of policies and guidelines before you even go on the road each year. That has to be done. I don't know that there's anyone who doesn't do it, but that's checked by DCI. Have there been groups that participant safety wise have been, come under scrutiny in some type of process? Yes, that has happened before. So, and I think, we all have the collective sense that anything that happens to one group is a negative for all of us because it's a small system and it's a small community and ecosystem. So I think that's a part of it too. We know we have to all work together to make sure people are protected at every group at every level. So I think there's I would like to think of it's more of a collaborative sense of moving forward rather than
I
punitive. But
think,
yes, there can be consequences.
yeah, I think that's the missing piece, Melissa.
That
That's
is
it
the
right
missing
there.
piece.
We
And I
might,
think
Genevieve, you might have just helped us uncover the
right.
lost treasure.
Yes, the answers
Um,
we have needed for all this
yeah,
time.
it's a great model. It's a great
Yeah.
model.
If I can add to that, I think, yes, we do get a little bit of pushback, especially from the people who are involved in the design element of the activity. And however, I will say, fast forward to where we are now, and they have seen that if they pay attention to these recommendations that various groups are making, they see less injuries, they have less kids sitting out, that it actually works to their favor in the end. And so, I would say, yes, we got pushed back because, again, as Genevieve said, the old term, that's the way we've always done it, was very much, the response that we got way back then. And now I would say that we have, much better buy-in, and people know who we are, and they understand that when we make recommendations, we're making them because it's going to keep their kids safe and participating, and they won't have a bunch of kids sitting out or injured. And I've seen, now, as I said, almost every group has an athletic trainer or access to someone in sports medicine, and that just was not a thing a decade ago. And we've moved kind of in the same direction with regards to mental health and our performers, in that, what we asked of them regarding the athletics, the athleticism years ago, we have asked of them also with regards to mental health. And I would say, all the organizations are taking that very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Just a total side note, how many organizations are in DCI?
Well, so I've talked about how it was set up with the member organizations, like with the example of like the NBA and the teams. So that doesn't actually paint the entire picture. So the member groups that have a voting power, there's approximately 20. It fluctuates at times, but there's approximately 20. But then there are a whole bunch of other organizations that also are kind of governed by DCI and participate in the events at different levels, but they're not. They're
Voting.
smaller groups that have their own circuits, this type of thing. You could like almost think of it like as I hate to use the word minor, but just saying like minor league baseball versus major. They might not be the voting teams, but they're still involved in the process. They still compete, and they still are subject to a lot of the regulations and recommendations. So we have open class and sound sport and different things like that. So there's another, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 groups that are part of that as well. And it's everything from somebody who might participate in one or two events a year to groups that are, just as big almost as some of the member groups, but they maybe haven't been around as long. They're kind of doing a similar thing where they travel around the United States for several weeks each summer. So there's different groups like that. But regardless, a lot of the things that have come out of the MASH committee, for instance, in regard to making sure you always have a certified medical professional with you at all times, and some of the things regarding heat, lightning, sound protection, etc. And all of those groups are subject to those types of standards.
Thank you. If you can't tell and you're just tuning in, my wheels are turning, turning. But you are watching Beyond the Steps. If you are just now tuning in, we are talking to Laura Van Doren and Genevieve Geisler about what is DCI and how is it promoting health in marching arts. It is not too late to join this conversation. Please drop your questions and comments in the chat, share, like, to call somebody, tell them that it's time to watch this episode, because we are learning a lot, and we are learning a lot across disciplines and industries, because I don't march at all, but I am learning so much that I can apply to the dance world that I just don't even know what to do with myself. So please make sure that you watch the rest of this episode and let somebody else know. If you want to go watch it from the beginning, you can catch the entire thing on YouTube at TP Dance Creations or at Apollo Performance. Laura, what role does nutrition and hydration play in DCI's health and wellness initiatives?
That's a great question. We have struggled for a few years early on just getting nutritionists to become part of our group because we just were not finding those individuals who were involved in the marching arts, because you really need to understand the nature of the beast in terms of our activity. It is so unique. It is somewhat like, or I should say, it has evolved somewhat like a touring Broadway show, except that it's done outdoors in the heat and the accommodations are not what you would find for a Broadway tour. That's right. For sure. So that said, we were lucky to pair up with a nutritionist by the name of Lisa Dorfman a couple of years ago, just pre-COVID, who is a nutritionist and and I should remember this, but she was involved in, I think, the U.S., I could be wrong on this, but the U.S. Sailing Olympic team. I think that's a thing. But anyway, so she had an athletic background and also a nutritionist, and she developed a culinary performance guide. I think it was like over 70 pages. It ended up being in just what was important in terms of nutrition and hydration with regards to these marching arts athletes and how best to feed them and how best to hydrate them. And in addition to that, we have taken that a step further in terms of climate change and made some specific recommendations just this year with regards to specifically to hydration based on measuring the climate, which we no longer measure just in terms of putting a thermometer out there. We have all kinds of measurement devices. One is called a Kestrel, which is a wet bulb globe thermometer, which takes into account other factors besides just the temperature and field surface temperature. And from those measurements, we make specific rehearsal and hydration recommendations. So we've certainly evolved quite a bit.
This is because most of everything they do is outside, correct? Like they're practicing outside, they're performing outside. I mean, everything is outside because these groups are so massively huge.
Right.
Yes.
It's all outdoors, and it's often, we travel around the United States. So you're going down to the southern United States in the middle of summer, of course. So this is during summer break of school. So it gets extremely hot and hotter.
Do the guidelines change per region? Because obviously the climate is different.
Lori would know for sure, but I don't, not really per region, but there's guidelines based on specific wet bulb globe, like temperatures or readings essentially that you're supposed to follow, and there's similar things for air quality that have come out now too. Like from last year, if you remember, there were all those wildfires in Canada. So things we're not very accustomed to at all, that they're only accustomed to dealing with on the West Coast. We had to deal with even like where my group's located in Ohio last year. That was a totally new thing again. But thankfully, they on the MASH committee, they have professionals that include as meteorologists as well as other types of health professionals. So they were able to guide us with what to do for bad air quality ratings and that kind of thing. So it even gets that specific.
That's fantastic.
And those are the type of issues that we have to deal with, essentially. Yeah.
I mean, it's not fantastic that you're dealing with those issues, but it's fantastic that you have people that are aware and providing guidance on those things. I think it's wonderful.
Well, and you're just thinking like MASH, okay, it's like doctors or nurses or nurse practitioners, whatever, but it's like it runs the gamut of things. And think of the issues we've had to deal with just in the last 5 years from COVID and COVID vaccination and protocols surrounding that. So public health, to the types of things Lori just talked about with the heat and increasing heat issues with climate change, the air quality thing that I just mentioned, and also just increased incidence of severe weather events. That's another thing that the meteorologists help us with as well. So all of those things are kind of, I've been, both of us have been doing this for kind of a long time, but like those are kind of new emerging issues that we fortunately have access to a lot of experts who have experience with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if you're just joining, I'm Bree with Apollo, Melissa McDaniel Grisham. This is Beyond the Steps. We do this every Friday. Today we're talking about talking to Genevieve Geisler and Laura Van Doren from Marching Arts Safety and Health and InStep under Drum Corps International, or DCI. And we're talking about what is DCI and how is it promoting health and wellness within the marching arts community. Genevieve, be sure to like, share, subscribe, give us a follow. Make sure to go back and watch this from the beginning on YouTube at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. It is a good one. Be sure to listen, educate yourself on this incredible sport. There's lots to learn. So, Genevieve, how are injuries and medical emergencies handled during DCI events and competitions?
Well, there's two aspects to that. So I won't say just during events and competitions, but really the vast majority of all that occurs during rehearsal, because we rehearse up to like 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
So it's a long slog. And it's also a lot of, there's one side is emergencies, and the other side is illnesses and, injuries that occur because of repeat, overuse injuries, essentially, so there's several different aspects of how that is handled. And, we've always had different types of medical people working with the different groups and all of that. But because of Lori's committee, MASH, we now have standards in place where someone is required by DCI to be with you at all times. And they recommend that at least one of those people is an athletic trainer, like she was talking about before. So they're really the point person for handling all of those things because they have a lot of experience with both, the overuse type injury type of thing, but also emergency issues as well as basic kind of health, medical, like, illnesses type stuff as well. So, I mean, she would have more specifics on all of that, but
yeah. So the individual organizations have an athletic trainer on site for practices. Does that athletic trainer have to be, I guess, vetted by MASH, or is it?
well, they have to have their certification, and whether it's a athletic trainer, nurse, doctor, whatever. I mean, you have to have their specific certifications that you have to have. You have to be a licensed athletic trainer, and you have to be just like you have to have your, be a licensed to practice in the state where you are as a physician,
But
or a nurse
then
practitioner.
at the competitive performance level, then when they do the shows and the competitions and things like that, does DCI have its own staff on hand, and then those teams bring their staff or their people, their representatives as well? Or is at that point when it's performance and competition environment, DCI kind of takes over and says, we've got this covered?
Well, from my perspective as a core director, it's very much like the NBA. You have a team doctor and you have athletic trainers that are yours that travel with you. My people are on the sideline. They have an emergency kit. They're ready to handle emergencies. They're working with people on their injuries throughout the day and up to the competition. It's very much like that scenario. Now, are there additional emergency personnel there, like ambulances, that type of thing? Yes, just like you would have at a sporting event. And there may be people from, MASH that are available to consult on things at various events as well. So, I mean, maybe Lori could speak some more to that, but that's how it works from my perspective as a core director. You have your people and they're traveling with you. So they're with you all day at practice, and then they come to the show and, they're on the sideline just like you would be at a basketball game.
Got it. Laura, anything to add to all of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good analogy. The only thing I would say is, yes, as she mentioned with the meteorologist, we are very fortunate to have a group of people with varied backgrounds and expertise. And because Drum Corps is, again, such a unique activity, when we have things that are maybe a bit less non-emergent, like not life-threatening, but other issues going on, the health and wellness teams that each Drum Corps has, be it an athletic trainer, nurse, or whoever they have traveling with them, when they encounter a situation that requires an understanding of our activity in order to make the plan for that member makes sense within the activity, that is often where they will consult members from our volunteer organization specifically with regards to whatever's going on in that member. Because, and I'll give you an example. So when you have a member who has some kind of a strain or a sprain type injury, or some kind of musculoskeletal injury, or even a medical problem, and they go to an ER, the emergency physician doesn't understand what we're doing and how we're traveling. And so they often will make recommendations that just don't really fit the situation.
Right.
And we're very aware.
And so, you know, we are able then to sort of morph those recommendations into what will make sense for that member. And if we can do that, you know, and have the member remain on tour, then we make those recommendations. And sometimes it's actually a decision where the member needs to go home and see a physical therapist and have actual, you know, physical therapy or whatever the issue is, to get better before they can come back. So, you know, we understand the activity where there is a resource for those health and wellness teams if they just can't really make the medical issue fit the situation that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
So, Genevieve, in maintaining and enforcing the guidelines and recommendations, how do you get around budget, or maybe this isn't an issue? You know, we're thinking about it from our perspective, but how do you get around budgetary concerns for each organization? Like, I would imagine that there is a budgetary concern of carrying around this apparatus and having it and having these trainers and medical professionals. Like, how do you help them navigate that?
Yeah, because I mean, let's be honest, when you implement these things and you're like, okay, now we're going to set this guideline and you guys are going to worry about, I mean, you have to hear a collective groan across the country going, oh, now we have to find the money to do this. And how are we going to do this? Like, there's got to be some pushback, I would.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's certainly, you know, a concern. Lori's laughing because budget, you know, this is, as much as I've made analogies to like the NBA, I mean, this is not professional sports, you know, the budgets are not anywhere near that. And while they're a lot more than they used to be, they're still, you know, extremely low considering what the type of events and performances that we're able to pull off. And I also think
incredible. If you haven't seen a show, go see it. I mean, it will blow your mind. That's all.
And I think it's also important to note that, you know, also unlike professional sports, you know, there's a huge variation in wealth of, or the amount of resources that each of the individual groups has, even amongst the member corps, the 20 member corps. And when you're, you know, like I talked about the sound sport, you know, that might only do 1 or 2 events versus, you know, somebody that's, you know, people that are traveling all around the country or are doing several events, you know, there's a huge range of budgets. And that definitely was a concern when we started hearing and talking about the standard of having specific certified professionals with you at all times. So yes, that's a concern. But, you know, I think that collectively, number one, people have realized, and I hope we have all realized now that in the end, you know, if you want to just talk about it dollars and cents, I mean, obviously it's the right thing to do. It's right for the participants, but in the end, you know, the risk of having someone be grievously harmed is also extraordinarily financially risky for our entire business model. So that is one consideration. In addition, DCI has been able to provide some, you know, granting, you know, through funding that they've received, like some granting resources, for instance, to help you purchase one of the wet globe thermometer thing she was talking about, because those are kind of expensive. Or there were some grants that became available a couple of years ago to give each group several $1,000s to help pay for an athletic trainer, for instance, or purchasing an AED or these kind of equipment. And, you know, you just have to allocate your resources in that way, obviously, and make it a priority. It's like anything else. You know, you have to decide what's most important, and you have to hopefully make those one of your priorities. I would also say because we are nonprofit organizations and because DCI is a nonprofit organization, we're very fortunate to be able to rely on a lot of people who are either volunteers or volunteering their professional advice and expertise, or who are extremely into marching band or drum corps in some way that allows them to see fit to participate, that's at a financial compensation level that may not be quite equivalent with their actual, ability to make money in background. Just like many of us, you're doing something because you love it. It's not necessarily the highest paid job that you personally could possibly get, so all of those aspects, are involved in it. And a lot of the people on, while at least from my perspective from the Bluecoats, all the people that work with us day to day, the athletic trainers that are hired to travel around with us, those people are all, paid. A lot of the experts that you're able to consult are volunteers or, that make themselves available to us because they care and because they're giving back to students and an activity they oftentimes love. And we also have the added resource of people's parents, or people that are parents of students who were in drum corps at least at one time, that are out of 165 students every year, someone's parents are going to be medical professionals. So we have that, added resource as well.
Right.
So definitely a concern, but we have various ways of a sort of ameliorating it, I guess, that kind of vary across the thing. But yeah, you got to devote some resources to it, especially if you want to hire athletic trainers to travel with you. I mean, that's reality.
Right. Absolutely.
You
That
know,
makes
and
total sense.
if I can just add to that a little bit, I have said several times, this is a unique activity, but this is an activity that literally changes lives. And so a lot of people, the life lessons that you learn from being in this activity are pretty remarkable. And what you see at a performance, if you could just see what goes on behind the scenes in terms of teaching young adults about just being responsible and accountable, and accomplishing something far greater than they ever thought they could. Those participants take those life lessons and they go and they live their lives and they get their degrees or whatever they choose to do. And oftentimes we are very fortunate in that they'll come back to the activity and want to give back. And so that's why I have this group of amazing healthcare professionals who literally volunteer their time at a medical liability to themselves, who are willing to help this organization move forward.
Yeah.
And I would say too, maybe it would be instructive to just say, like, at least, I mean, I don't know exactly what every group does, obviously, and Lori might know more about that, but I can tell you exactly like how we handle it, like at Bluecoats, right? So we have, at all times with us, we have two at ATCs, certified athletic trainers, and then during our spring training, which is when we're not moving, we have several like athletic training interns that are working on their degree, and they have to do an internship as part of their degree process, and the preceptors are our certified athletic trainers, which not only helps more people learn about athletic training in the like marching arts field, but also can has helped provide us with a pipeline of future certified athletic trainers once they finish their school who already know about drum corps and like it. So we have that with us all the time. We also have a team physician that, does clearances and things with them. He's a Blue Coat alum. He's paid a pittance, but he's very interested in helping out. He works primarily remotely, but, he cares about drum corps and Blue Coats, and he's willing to provide that service to us. We also have, it's not just 2 athletic trainers total on our team though, because usually people can't come for 12 weeks at once, right? So we have like 5 or 6 different people that are rotating in and out. We also have 2 volunteer licensed counselor therapists that are primarily remote, but they're available to students via Slack, email, and phone pretty much at all times. And then we also have a social worker who comes with us to spring training and is a paid professional that's available to students at all times when he's not there as well via so Slack and email, etc. So we kind of use that framework, and then all of those people are also, especially the athletic trainers, they're also able to consult the other experts as we are as the directors that are available through Lori's committee.
Wow. That is phenomenal. I hope there are people out there listening with their listening ears about the format there and how it can actually work. If you are just now tuning in, we are finishing up an amazing show with Laura Van Doren and Genevieve Geisler. And you need to watch this episode from the beginning because we're talking about what is DCI and how it's promoting health in marching arts. So please, please, please watch this from the beginning. Go to YouTube or Facebook at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations and start it from the beginning. Please share, please tag someone, please subscribe so you know when we have new episodes like this as well. So it is time for homework. Bree, you want to go forward?
Yeah. So Genevieve and Laura, you guys are new to the show. We give our listeners homework every single week, something they can do to improve or shed light in their life on the topic we talked about today between now and the next episode next week. So I'll start with you, Laura. What is your homework assignment for our audience?
Oh gosh.
Genevieve, do you have one? Laura, we can come back.
Oh no, Laura can go first.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate that. I mean, in terms of
anything they can do to be more educated on any of this.
Sure. Well, you can go to a performance this summer. If you go to DCI.org, you will find a list of all of the performances all over the country. And you can also just read about what is drum corps and watch some of the videos and YouTubes. You'll see the performances, but if you can find some videos on what happens behind the scenes, it's really pretty amazing. I always say my daughter is a musical theater actress. And so, she would often tell me it's way more interesting to see what happens behind the curtain than in front of it.
Sure.
And I think the same thing exists with the drum and bugle corps activity in that, what goes on behind the scenes is fascinating, but just educating yourself on what happens within our organization. And I think that, we try to set the standard for the marching arts. So just, seeing what the high school marching bands are doing these days. I live in Texas now, and I am just completely blown away by what they're able to accomplish in the short amount of time that they get to rehearse, just even within their organization.
I think that's a great assignment. Genevieve, what about you?
I would say, check out after you check out a show or the types of the things that Lori was talking about, maybe go to DCI.org, go to individual corps website and check out all the things we actually are doing. A lot of times people think, oh, they're not taking care of this. Oh, what about this? What about that? But the reality is a lot of people have spent a lot of time that's over in, like Lori, like all the experts on the MASH committee, a lot of people have spent a lot of time, often uncompensated because of their love of this activity, to really create a much safer environment in all aspects for our participants, and you can find out a lot about that on DCI.org and, bluecoats.com, whatever other drumcorps.com. They're going to have a dash safety page or an DEI information on there about the things that we've been doing by using SafeSport, by having whistleblower compliance and hiring, policies, by incorporating the MASH recommendations into our own policies at DCI and within the individual groups. There's a lot of work that's already been done. So I'd encourage people to look and, take a look at all of that. And also if you are an expert or if you're not, find a way to, help out, whether it's a small group or a large group, offer expertise, cook a meal one day. There's all types of volunteer opportunities available. And that's a really great way to see. That's a really great way to see like the behind the scenes that Lori was talking about, that it's not, sure, you can go watch everyone perform, but how, the amazing level of collaboration and organization that it takes to put each one of those performances out there. The only way to really find out about that is to get behind the scenes, and a great way to do that is volunteering.
It's a big machine. It takes a lot to make it go. It takes a lot of hands. It takes a village. So, we appreciate everything you guys are doing. And just this was fantastic to learn about. I think there's a lot to take from you all and what you're doing. We also have our own homework that we do every week here. It was the catalyst for this show. It's a Take Our Steps initiative course. It is completely free. It is a 5-part course series. Every module was generated by an expert in their field. You're going to get education and resources on racism, gender inequity, sex abuse prevention, nutrition, psychology, and dance medicine and science. You can go at your own pace, but set your foundation. Take this course. Again, you can go at your own pace, and it's absolutely free. Yes, free. Take it now. It's available at the link. Click the link that Melissa just put up there. And I don't do this every show. Melissa, you can testify that I do not do this every show, but I'm going to do it today because I think it's relevant and important. Get your Apollo socks. Apollo socks are a proud partner. We are endorsed by DCI and the recommended socks of DCI. We are a compression sock that is lifting and stabilizing the arch ankle and providing energy absorption padding, proven to reduce force of impact. We're removing the inflammation that causes aches, pain, and swelling and injury due to overuse. And we're improving circulation to help the body recover faster so you can do more of what you love. And we want to keep feet on the field. We have a couple really big sponsorships that we're excited to share coming up, but you need to get these socks and wear them as much as you can for practice, performance, and recovery. We guarantee our products. They're supported by the APMA, and we have independent studies backing up what I'm saying right now. So check them out. You can't lose, but get them at apolloperformance.com. So both of you, Genevieve and Laura, how can people get a hold of you, or what's the best way if people have questions about DCI, about MESH, about InStep? How can they get a hold of both of you?
Well, for me, if you go to bluecoats.com, all my contact information is easily found. So, I'm happy to. I'm sure that Lori does too. Spend a lot of our time just talking about our the things that we care about and trying to spread them across the marching arts activities. So, I'm happy for anyone to reach out to me anytime. Easy to find out.
Thank you. Laura, do you want to share anything?
Well, I will put a shameless plug in for our organization. If you love the marching arts, even if you don't know what drum corps is, and you're a healthcare professional, a licensed allied healthcare professional, and you want to get involved in our organization in some way, you can just go to dci.org/health, and it will take you to a form that you can complete, and you can inquire more about who we are and what we have. And just in terms of your interest in Drum Corps International, I can be reached through DCI at lvandoren@dci.org, and anyone can directly email me if they want.
Thank you both so much for everything you're doing for the marching arts community, but also for taking your time and being here today to educate us and shed some light on all the work that's being done within DCI and for the marching arts world. It's absolutely incredible. Congratulations on all the success, and we're cheering for you. We can't wait to see what you all do coming up. We know you have probably lots of the work for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined us today for this amazing episode. Thank you to our two excellent guests, and thank you to Bree for being here as an amazing co-host. I definitely appreciate you as we start to bring season 4 to a close. It is very, very hard to believe. If you did not catch this episode from the beginning, please make sure you go to YouTube at Apollo Performance or at TP Dance Creations and catch the entire thing, and make sure you share it with somebody. We will be back next week, 3:30 Eastern, with another fantastic episode, and we hope to see you there. Until then, make sure you continue your journey beyond the steps. See you next week.